The CGA Tour, a podcast unlike any other. Now your host, Calvin Alexander.
Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of the CGA Tour podcast. As always, here I'm your host, Calvin Glenn Alexander. And on tonight's episode, I'm joined by pistolsfiring.com and sportsillustrated.com. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. Not Pistols Guys. That's the Twitter handle, right?
Yep.
But writer here and all around good guy, but also Oklahoma State alum here with me, Dekota Gregory. Dekota, thanks so much for joining. And how's it going?
Appreciate it. I'm always glad to be here. So always good when I get to talk sports with you, Calvin.
Yeah. No, thanks for coming on here. I do want to say a quick shout out to thanks so much for all the new subscribers and followers and viewers here. If you're liking what I'm doing here and frequently have Dekota on, please like, share, subscribe, comment here down below if it's on YouTube, or share with a friend if you're listening to the audio version. But yeah, Dekota wanted to get you on here, talk a little bit about Mike Gundy's rant today he made in the press conference, and then also talk about this just 6-game skid that Oklahoma State's on, as well as hopefully get your thoughts on the future here. I don't know if you can predict them or not. The season's been so up and down, at least really down as of late, but it was up to the beginning. Beginning, it was 3-0. We're on solid ground. There's a lot of other Big 12 teams where we're tied record-wise because they lost one of their 3 non-conference games, but they have also won a Big 12 game, so they're also 3-6. But I don't necessarily want to compare us to really KU or Arizona right now. You know, seems like a bad spot to be in, right?
Yeah, not good. Which, if we were talking about when she was 3-0, it might not be bad. If we thought, compare OSU to KU at this point in the season, we thought that would be a good thing. I think, if I remember right, I think I had OSU and KU playing for a Big 12 title, and now they're at the bottom, which is crazy. And then I remember when we were on your podcast preseason, I think that was one of the people you mentioned as a dark horse. We talked about Arizona just because they weren't on OSU's schedule, so we weren't talking about them. But there was a dark horse. Maybe they could slip into a trip to Arlington. And here we are. Now those are at the bottom, and we got BYU undefeated, and predictions are pointless. I told Marshall I might start boycotting them in general because all they do is make us look like we have no idea what we're talking about, or they just reveal that we actually know we have no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, I actually did a deep dive here over this weekend, and ESPN had a video put together over the BYU quarterback Jake Reslav, excuse me. And one, super interesting. A bunch of these guys during COVID, just didn't get scouted correctly. They started playing football super late. This guy basically was an all-sport kind of all-star, and then just focused on being a quarterback going into a senior of high school. But then that was just cut out completely because of COVID. He's one of those guys who then had to play a couple years at JUCOs, 2 different ones. Then went to BYU. Last year was on that 5-7 team, and now is on a unbeaten team, the lone unbeaten team in the Big 12, which is wild to say. And yeah, maybe he just needed more time, and we all just seen it coming. But I don't really believe that, to be honest. I feel like BYU's had a string of some things go their way, and last year that Oklahoma State team I think we're just way luckier. And all those stats saying Oklahoma State was just so lucky, we're just like, oh well, yeah, but Gundy teams are always lucky, and he's usually good in close games, all type of stuff. But on the 6-game losing streak, there really haven't been that many close games except for the BYU one. And Gundy hasn't even been able to try to coach close games, I guess, is kind of my point here, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's that whatever was the magic sauce last year is definitely gone. And you heard nationally, there was, I don't know what all went into it, but the stat of OSU was the luckiest team in the country or whatever, when I'm a numbers guy and I look at stats and I try to look at facts and things like that, and you think, what in the world does it mean to, gauge someone's luck? How can you use that as a stat? But now you look and you see these same people, the same guys, the linemen that are all back. You get the Doak Walker winner and Ollie Gordon, all these receivers. You get Alan Bowman back. You get, you think, the defense is going to take a step forward with Brian Nardo in his second year. And then here they are, the same team, 3-6. And you just see, I think today, as we're recording this, I don't know when you're posting this, but on Monday, it's exactly a year since OSU beat OU in Bedlam. So to think that's essentially the same team. And if you were to tell us at that moment in the press box when we're watching people storm the field that, hey, this same team all these coming back. The lineman's coming back. Bowman is going to magically get another year. You got the receivers. Brendan Presley's going to get another year. All these people are coming back. Nardo's going to come back. You're going to get his second year in the defense again. You would think there's no way that team would be 3-6. But again, maybe like you said, maybe it was the luck. I don't know. But like you said, it has been all blowout. So it definitely hasn't been. We cannot say there was bad luck involved this year. They've just been flat out getting blown out by teams this year. So no luck involved this year. They're just not as good as anyone they're playing.
Yeah, and if you're watching this on YouTube right now, I'm basically just sharing that the luck rating was 3.0. The only team better in the country last year was Washington, who went 14-1, and we went 10-4. And it shows up that we were really, really lucky. I don't know how that compares necessarily to this season as far as luck goes, and I'll try to figure it out here pretty quickly. But is there any part of you that goes, yeah, we should have seen this coming? Kind of like this. Maybe not even this bad, but yeah, there were some faults going into the season this year that maybe I should have, you should have, whoever should have, seen coming a little bit more. Now that we're at the point where they're really evident.
Yeah, I mean, I guess hindsight's 2020. Obviously, you think, we drank the orange Kool-Aid and all off season and this hype, and we were under, maybe in this OSU bubble, and, we watched what they did last year, and we saw the over-under, right? What was the over-under, like 7 or 8 beginning of the season? At one point, it was like 6.5. We thought Vegas is crazy. National media is crazy. Even little things like College Football 25 and Marshall's doing his simulations, or we're playing on NCAA football, and even, like if I'm playing another team and you still see OSU still not doing very well. And you're like, what in the world? Why are they? Do they not see what we're seeing? And obviously, we didn't see what they're seeing is what the issue is. And so maybe, right, the luck thing. Maybe I don't know. It's a perspective thing. Now we're here and we see what's going on. You think back to the UCF loss, but then I think we overrode that with, well, we saw them beat OU. That wasn't a terrible team. I mean, the Sooners still won 10 games last year. You look back to the Texas. Obviously, they got blown out by Texas, but that's a team that was, in a college football playoff who we knew was going to be a lot more talented and got beat by OU somehow, and they beat OU. So I guess if you want to, in a way, we should have saw it coming, I guess, when you think the linemen weren't great, but then again, they were down the stretch, right? You saw what they did for Ollie Gordon once things changed after those first couple of weeks. You saw how well they protected Bowman. We knew Bowman wasn't incredible, but I remember, again, when we were here talking to you preseason, and Marshall was saying, hey, if we see Zane Flores, I think things went bad. Like, I don't think OSU fans want to see Zane Flores, which we never saw Zane Flores. Theoretically, we would have in this season because of how Bowman's performing and how the seasons went. But we thought there was no way that would happen. So I think the reality is, no, I don't think any of us should have seen it coming. I think if anyone says they saw it coming, they're crazy, because this is a team that went 10-4 last year and returned everyone. You never imagine them to get worse, especially this much worse. Maybe a little bit. But not only did they return everyone, as much as people hate hearing this, the conference got weaker. I mean, that's the reality, especially when you see how Utah is right now. They're not OU. They're not Texas. I mean, Texas is one of the best teams in the country, if not the best team in the country. OU's kind of getting their teeth knocked in by the SEC right now, but they would have a lot more wins. They're in the Big 12. I mean, that's the reality of it. They're getting beat up front. Not that many teams would kill them as much up front in the Big 12. But seeing OSU do that well, like with teams like Texas and OU on their schedule, beat one of them and not win a Big 12 title because Texas is in the way and now they're out of the way, for them to still get worse, that is the craziest part to predict and how the seasons went.
Yeah, and to further emphasize this, on the measure of how likely a team was to win based on how they played during the game, Oklahoma State was the luckiest last year by a good margin, actually, by 4.2 wins. So they're expected to win a total of 4.8, this is all last season, but it's just, it's bizarre to me because I did not see this coming into the season whatsoever. I really thought, hey, you know what? Like, yeah, we might not be good, but we'll at least contend. Like and by we might not be good, we'll still get 10 wins. Like I didn't think, okay, I didn't think, oh, we're world beaters, we're easily going to win the Big 12. But I was still thinking, hey, we'll at least do what we did last season. Part to your point, hey, we don't have to play OU again, and several other teams that last year that we just played really poorly against, UCF, for example, we're not facing again this year. Iowa State, they're always tough, especially at their place, even when it's in Stillwater. We're not playing them. And hey, we get to play Arizona State, who's supposed to be pretty bad. They haven't turned out to be that bad, of course, or we've just turned out to be that much worse, however you want to say it. But yeah, Texas Tech, TCU, 3 teams on the schedule. Colorado coming into the season was not supposed to be really good. And it was kind of well, hey, if they're in the Heisman Trophy race, if Travis Hunter or Sanders is, it's because they are doing Herculean efforts, not because the team could win the conference. And now all of a sudden we're sitting here with 3 games left on the schedule, right? Going, man, I think there's a good chance Colorado makes it to Big 12 championship and we don't win another Big 12 game. I want to ask you about that too here before I get into the Gundy comments from today. What's your likelihood even of this weekend here against TCU and then, Tech for the final for senior day and then at Colorado on a Friday night?
I definitely would say this is their best week, right? At getting a win. TCU hasn't been that impressive, but I think we've said that about not trying to dog on the Big 12 too much, but we've said that about most weeks, right? I knew Arizona State's winning a lot. That game, we were like, oh, they're going to get beaten because Scatterboo against that defense we knew was not a good combo. But like Baylor, I didn't look great, and they get throttled they beat Tech. They beat Tech the week before, but before that they hadn't looked very good. So you were really, the last time we talked on this, what was it, after the BYU loss, or it was right before? It was during the bye week. And, I said, hey, we're going to know a lot of what this team has changed when they get out to BYU, which we did. If they would have stuck with their plan, we might be talking a lot differently if Garrett Rangel had not broken his collarbone. But even after BYU, you would think, okay, maybe they still have legit chance against teams like Baylor and TCU. But that Texas Tech offense, I mean, it's good. And any offense that's even average is going to be, I mean, they just look like a Lincoln Riley type offense when they're playing OSU. And then Colorado, you think of Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, all that talent going against this defense on a Friday. I think it's actually a Friday morning, so at least it's not a night game, but a Friday morning, a Black Friday game. It's their last game. If they do have Big 12 aspirations, there's no telling. I mean, they might kick OSU's teeth in that game because of what's on the line. And by that point, OSU's more likely going to know there's no bowl game in sight. There's no winning record. There's nothing. You're just playing for pride and to try to ruin their chances of getting to Arlington. We've already seen kind of players kind of slack a little bit, and even Gundy called out their effort next week. So if we're 3 games or 3 weeks from now, and they're had 2 more losses, that effort obviously wouldn't increase. So yeah, this week is definitely the best week for them to win, but I still don't see it. Right? I think any competent offense, I've written about this a lot in my grades the last few weeks. Until the defense improves drastically, this football team can't win with the defense they have. There's no way. I mean, you can say all you want about Bowman and the offensive line, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what that offense does. They would have to be incredible, like Texas Tech with Patrick Mahomes type when they had a bad defense. But that's reality. It doesn't matter who they're playing. It doesn't matter how TCU's look. It doesn't matter how Tech has looked or Colorado. This team cannot win another game until something happens with that defense.
Yeah. Why has there been such a seismic shift in that, in your opinion, of the defense last year versus this year? Because last year was not good, and then actually it was pretty bad by the numbers go, because I've looked into it, but it was definitely not this bad. And is that small kind of margin here where it was last year it was bad, but at least getting better, it seemed, but this year it's so much worse? Is that more or less the guys we lost this year just not being able to play?
I get the injuries excuses, right? Like you said, I cover OU, so I get that they're missing top 5 receivers, and I've even kind of used that as a crutch for the Sooner struggles this year. But OSU's defense they were terrible before Nick Martin got hurt. They were terrible before Trey Rucker got hurt. I mean, they were bad before then. Obviously, that just made it detrimental, and then they became even worse. But I think last year there was enough to this team where it disguised in certain ways how bad it was. I think a big part is they were able to run the ball more, so that was less opportunities for the defense to be on the field, and so that gave them, hey, that's maybe, even if it's 2 drives, that's 2 less drives that they're out there. That might be a difference between them giving up 21 points and 35 points, which looks a big difference when you're looking on the scoreboard. And they also came up in those clutch situations. I mean, there was multiple times last season when we were thinking, man, this defense is going to give this game away. They haven't been able to stop this team all week or all day. And then all of a sudden at the end, they would come up with the interception. They would stop them on 4th down. They would, think of the BYU game we just talked about. They couldn't stop BYU all game. And then was it Trey Rucker had the strip fumble and he recovered it and essentially won the game for them after Ollie went off. And so you think of times like that, and they're not doing that this time. Like if they would have stopped BYU a couple weeks ago, they couldn't stop them for even on a 4th and long. They couldn't stop them for a minute and whatever it was. But if they could have stopped them for just a minute, we would at least said after that Friday night, hey, this defense came through. Like at least they looked horrible all game, but they came through. And we said that a lot last year. They're just not coming through in those moments, on top of having to be out there even more than were last year, because this year there's no running game as well. On top of the turnovers. I mean, that hurts too. I know Bowman's always turned the ball over, but turning the ball over even more this year. And so, again, that puts the defense out there in short yardage situations as well. So just everything's going against them right now.
Yeah, I'm starting to remember last year where when Bowman wasn't the clear and away starter, how I was at least thinking of him as, well, this guy was a 3rd stringer over at Michigan. Like he didn't come here from a starting quarterback spot at a different team, and then either as a Will Howard, where it's like, hey, we're kind of showing you the door, and he might have even upgraded overall to go to Ohio State from K-State, but also wasn't I forget what the guy's name is who went to Syracuse from Ohio State. It wasn't even that deal either, where it's like, hey, you're playing for a Power 4 team as a starting quarterback, but we just don't love you, so hey, find another opportunity here, and because we got a guy coming in. It wasn't that either. And a little bit of me is like, all right, well, maybe you should have seen it, but I never saw the offense playing this way this year. I mean, that's for sure. And the defense, I'm also willing to go, hey, there's a little bit of injury stuff here and there, because we are allowing the most yards rushing in the entire conference by a good margin. But also, there's just some stuff where I'm thinking effort at this point, because that's all I'm left to think. I mean, if there were other options here where it was, hey, you know what, we're down like 4 starters. Well, we're down 2, maybe 3, some games, and Nick Martin, who knows if he comes back? Colin Oliver, who knows if he comes back? But if they do come back and they play a little bit, and we're still pretty bad, which I think we will be, then okay, that argument's gone. And also, as to your point, South Dakota State put up some yards. Arkansas put up a ton of yards on us. And then Tulsa didn't do a ton, but I don't think we had a rushing touchdown against Tulsa. Or at least Ollie didn't have a rushing touchdown, which to me was also a little bit of a, okay, just our running game. I know against Tulsa, our running game was just not getting going, but it didn't matter. We won 45-10. You're not thinking much about it. But then when I'm going, dude, Tulsa's really bad. They're really bad. And I feel bad for the whole state of Oklahoma football wise, except for, I guess, UCO and maybe SNU from what I understand. But I'm getting real specific topics here for Oklahoma fans of football and not necessarily covering Oklahoma State. I'm curious as well here. So we've lost 6 in a row. Arizona State loss is really tough to deal with when we had the delay, and you figure, hey, we're all in cushy locker room spaces at home. They're sitting in, at least not as comfortable stuff, and they probably don't have the same access to whatever stuff. We probably have a little bit of the technology advantage because we're at home, or a little bit of the comfort advantage or whatever. Let's go out there. We're only down 7. and give him hell. And then we end up, not scoring. I mean, Malachi Smith was the next one to score. Yeah, I mean, I know it was a passing touchdown, but still, it just is, it feels like something's off. Something's wrong with kind of the program as a whole. And this leads me to the Gundy question, especially about his comments today. Do you think there's something going on where, hey, if stuff's not changed, we could see recruits fall off, or next year even be worse than this year, or at least be the same? Because I think going in this year, we were thinking, hey, this is like the year. We've got all these guys. We've got Ollie, we've got Allen, we've got how many 23-plus-year-old, linemen, and Shad Owens and Stribling, etc. I mean, is there a possibility next year it's even worse?
I definitely think next year will be worse. I mean, that's what even preseason I was saying, hey, enjoy this season because next year is going to be rough. Like, yeah, you get to embrace all these. Well, we thought you get to enjoy 5 really good starting offensive linemen, and they're all going to be gone. Like that's the downfall of them all coming back and being experienced is next year they're gone. Alan Bowman, we saw what he did last year. We expect more out of him this season, but he would be gone. You would be replacing 5 offensive linemen. You're replacing your quarterback. And Ollie Gordon more than likely is going to the league. So that's your biggest playmakers. You're replacing Brendan Presley as well, your top receiver. So those are 8, 9 really huge staples on your offense that you're having to replace. And so, yeah, I think regardless of how this year went, if it did go how we thought, if they went 10-2, 11-1, and we're talking about them going to Arlington the first week in December, I think even then I would still be telling you, no, next year is going to be tough, right? Especially if Bowman would have started the whole season, because then we wouldn't have, we wouldn't have seen anyone else, right? Garrett Rangel and Abney, more experience. Zane Flores probably still wouldn't have seen the field at all. We would have probably entered next season in a 2-3 quarterback shuffle between who knows who. And I mean, it would be chaos. And so that's the scary part is this is when they're supposed to be good and they're 3-6. And then next year is when it's supposed to be rough. And maybe, I don't know. That's what people say. I saw, it was more of a national media person say like, they don't get my Gundy, where he's the worst coach ever when it's supposed to be a great team, but somehow the best coach ever when you're supposed to have a bad team. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like last year when he did it, like that would be a bad team, but he did what he did and he turned around and they go 10-4. So I don't know. That's how things work at Oklahoma State. You never know. But as far as if I'm just going to kind of brace Oklahoma State fans, it would be, hey, brace yourself. Like, it's only going to get, I would expect it to get a lot worse next year, especially when you got, Avery Johnson is a freshman. Isaac Wilson at Utah, I know they're bad, but he's a freshman. And so you got some young talent. Matt Campbell just continues to get better. Maybe he's reached the next level. You're just seeing steps being made, and OSU would be taking a step back next year as far as we would think, while there are other programs ahead of them continue to take steps forward as well.
Yeah, on that. So Gundy, if anyone missed it, he basically made comments earlier today that said, "Hey, if you're criticizing me, more than likely you're not be able to pay your bills." And I'm really, really paraphrasing here, but I will say that's the gist of it, unless you say I'm wrong. But why is he making these comments at this point? What do you think has ticked him off more than anything else here? Because I don't want to dive too deep into what does he mean by this? What's really all the big deal? I just think this ticked him off enough for him to make such a strong comment on the guys making comments at him. And also from somebody who's covered different head coaches in different sports and has kind of writing experience, do you think other coaches are under the same kind of scrutiny or even worse at other universities? And is Gundy being a kind of a little bit of, I don't want to say prima donna or anything, but is he really just kind of being a lot extra? It's probably the way the kids would say it, or the way we'd say it in this situation too.
I will put it up, since you asked, kind of comparing it to other programs, even before all this happened, Saturday morning. So Friday, I think, is when it came out. John Hoover, the publisher of Sooners on SI, who I work for, wrote a column kind of just going at Brent Venables, saying, hey, this is why, OU's not headed in the right direction. I think the headline was something about why OU is not headed in the right direction to Brent Venables, whatever, and just kind of laying things out and things that Venables has said, and here they're, unlike OSU, actually making changes, and he's desperate to try to keep his job. And I sent to Marshall Saturday morning, and the reality is, I said, if you or anyone else on the OSU beat wrote something like this, there's probably people at the gate trying not to let you into the game today. I mean, that's just kind of how things work at OSU, because Gundy does have issues with a lot of people who come after him. And that's when you see this happens. I saw the thing on social media today. It was a joke, but kind of the levels of a bad season of Mike Gundy, where you have the funny quotes and then you have whatever. And now we're at the point to where you're getting today in society type of issues, right? And you go on these rants when things are bad. And that's when he kind of starts coming up media, because that's the voice, right? We're the voice of the fans. We're the ones supposed to be asking, hey, what they're wondering, what they're concerned about. Because at the end of the day, we're unbiased, but we are. I mean, if you guys don't read our content, we don't have jobs, right? So if we're not asking and writing about what you want to know, then you're not going to read our stuff, and we lose what we do for a living. We got to get normal jobs, I guess. So that is when we start seeing Gundy kind of be like this. I do think, again, the Brent Venables stuff, I think if he handles it the way that Gundy has, I mean, what was it, 3 weeks ago before BYU, he told fans again to quit and essentially, and then he kind of comes back to it with this comment. I think Brent Venables would not have a job today, if we're being honest. And I know it's kind of pairing apples to oranges with OU and OSU, but I think that's most places. Right before I got on here with you, someone commented, and I shared the quote and stuff on Twitter, and he was a Florida fan, and he was like, if Bill Napier said this, he would be fired right now. Like he would not have his job. And it's different, right? Other coaches, I'm not saying every coach that says that, but coaches that can say that and get away with it are coaches that are 10-0 or on winning streaks, not losing 6 straight. Which I think Gundy overall, there's one guy that has been on Gundy's side of social media that I've seen, and it's more of the, hey, he's had good 18 years out of 19 years, theoretically, which his first year is not good. But, and so maybe that's why. And so we know he's invincible in a way. And so maybe he knows he can get away with this. So he'd rather maybe shut people up, instead of just take it. But we have seen it critiqued, because some of the best you see Gundy is bowl week press conferences. I don't know if you've ever paid attention, but when the season's over, he's got a bowl game. He's made the bowl game. He's got recruiting done. He doesn't have to worry. Like, it doesn't matter if he wins or loses. No one's going to worry about a bowl game. So that's reality. We don't remember who wins or loses the bowl game. He's the most relaxed. It'd be in his office. That's the best he is. And so obviously the more he loses, the more stress is going to be on him. I'm sure the reality is fans don't think it, but he's hearing what they're saying. He's not on social media, but whatever the poor folk are saying on Twitter, the rich people with the money, they're making sure that their concern is voiced to Mike Gundy and Weiberg or whoever it is. So he definitely feels some sort of pressure, even if we don't think he does. So I think that's where it comes from. It's Mike Gundy's way of saying, calm down, shut up, I got this. I've been doing it for 19 years, and not having to handle the situation he's in. He doesn't have to handle. Like, Brent Venables has to be like, I'm sorry, I'm really trying. I love you, fans, basically. I'm sorry, this is not what you deserve as fans of Oklahoma. This is not what we do. He has not earned that right yet, nor does that program. You're not going to earn that right at University of Oklahoma. And Mike Gundy does have a unique situation that most coaches do, especially at major programs. That's for sure.
Yeah, I put out the poll a couple of days ago on Twitter saying who's going to retire first, Kyle Whittingham or Mike Gundy. And although I do think there's a way that Gundy could retire and then come back, just because he is not 60 yet. I mean, he's a younger guy out there coaching college football, even though he's been coaching for quite some time. I do think it'd be Gundy over Whittingham at this point, just because this seems like a good exit door for him. I don't necessarily think that he leaves either, though I have no way, shape, or form want to report that. I do think he goes out on a little bit better terms, at least leaves the program a little bit better. Do you think anything happens here with the coordinators, either during the rest of the season or the off season?
I definitely, just historically how Gundy is, I don't think it matters at this point. I don't think he's going to make a midseason change. It just doesn't. It doesn't have. I think he would have by now. I think after you get Rado like that, maybe if they get blown out by TCU, but who are you going to replace it? I don't think mid-season hires help. I just don't. I don't. It seemed to help a little bit with OU. It provided a little bit of a spark when they fired Seth Luttrell and they threw Joe John Finley out there. And I think it was more of a wake-up call for players saying, like, oh, crap, we got our coach fired. Like, I remember maybe it was Gabe Eichert who, said something like, there's no worse feeling as a player than getting your coach fired. Like that, like you don't think of it as a player's perspective because all of a sudden you're like, that's on me, right? You don't have a job because of me. And so that makes them, forces them to step up a little bit. So maybe if you wanted to take that aspect, it would help. But just the way he rolls, I also wouldn't be surprised, again, if there's the same coordinators next year. Like maybe at this point, you lose out, you finish the season, 3-9. Maybe you're forced to make some changes. Something's got, you have to change something. Excuse me. But then there's argument against keeping Nardo. I think he's the obvious, hey, get rid of him. He's in over his head. But the argument is, hey, you brought him in to run an entirely new system, and it's only his second year. And not only that, he hasn't been able to run his system. Like even Marshall asked him after the game Saturday, asked Gundy, like, hey, you brought Nardo in to run a 3-down front, and you're not running a 3-down front. So maybe, hey, we're going to buy our time. Maybe Gundy saying, hey, we're going to buy our time, get rid of him, and we're going to bring someone in that does run the offense or defense like we used to, and this isn't working out like we thought. And so either way, I think Nardo was dealt a horrible hand coming to Oklahoma State. He was in over his head. He was brought in to implement an entirely new system with players that were not his, and then they didn't ever actually run it. Like it struggled the first 3 or 4 games, and then they just it was like a hybrid of it. They still had 4 down. Now all of a sudden they're like not doing it at all. So he's not even really running his defense. He was not able to bring his own staff in. I mean, he was bringing, the same guys. He was teaching the traditional 4-down set. And so he was never set up for success here. I think it would be better off for him as well to get fired, to be able to go somewhere else. Maybe this finally got his foot in the door at the D1 level, maybe get a decent job somewhere else. But I think it'd be better for the program and him if they parted ways. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Gundy saying, well, he's only had 2 years. We shouldn't just completely scrap this thing after 2 years. And then for Casey Dunn, I mean, I remember it was just 3-4 years ago. He's yelling about a press conference because people are wondering if Casey Dunn's going to lose his job. And here we are again, as people still wondering if Casey Dunn's going to lose his job, and he still continues to have a job. So I don't know. I think he's going to, and Casey Dunn may doing just enough, right? He's still, last outing was bad, but he didn't look terrible. Honestly, the defense or the offense looked pretty solid against BYU. They looked pretty solid against Baylor. They looked horrible against Arizona State, but you could argue, well, he needs a mobile quarterback, and he had Bowman, whatever it may be. I think there would be enough excuses out there where I'm just saying, I know I'm rambling, but the short answer is I wouldn't be shocked if both coordinators are back. Like again, trying to brace Oklahoma State fans for the worst. Could be a tough season next year. And this is a Mike Gundy where he's loyal and true. I mean, whether it's a fault or you like the guy for it, he's going to stick by the guys he hires, whether it's just to prove he's not wrong or just because he's a loyal dude. I don't know what it is. But for whatever reason, he keeps sticking Casey Dunn around.
Yeah, I know we have a fellow friend here in common who I'm not going to mention, who is a big Casey Dunn supporter. And I, for a while, have thought, hey, you know what? Casey Dunn could be a really good offensive coordinator, and Gundy could be getting in his way. We definitely thought that in a little bit 2021 when, all right, Spencer Sanders would be playing good, but not great. And then we all of a sudden got a little bit more cautious in our play calling, and basically got very conservative in our calling and, what was going on. But at this point here, I think there's been enough time where Casey Dunn's been the offensive coordinator where, hey, it's either this is what he's got to live with. He's got to live with these limitations that he's got, or he's just not as great as I had hoped, being a wide receiver coach who I would say, is the preliminary wide receiver coach in the nation if it's just wide receivers. I mean, and you're not talking about any other part of his job. But then when it comes down to, hey, we've got some great wide receivers, but we got to figure out ways to just get them the ball. And every single thing I see on, I couldn't call it Twitter for forever, but Twitter/X is, oh, hey, if only we could do this. And it's just some crazy play call scheme where SMU has a fake, play action and then actually pops it back up to the guy that the play action was for after a second, and it's just some cute little design of some play call. And it's like, oh man, if only we could do this. And I would love to tell every Oklahoma State fan, I think we could try some of that if our line could block a little bit better, especially in the running game. I mean, how are you going to run the play action that well if you can really only block in the running game and not in the passing game? I know we talked about that for a while the last time I had you on here before the BYU game of like, hey, what's the difference? What's going on? And what's all this deal? But when it comes towards next season, what do you think the floor is? Because we don't play a ton of easy teams next year. Non-conference, it gets harder. We go to Oregon. I mean, it's just not. It's one of those things where, yeah, they probably won't have Dylan Gabriel, but it's still Oregon. They'll finish top 10 in the nation. They'll have an amazing recruiting class, and they'll probably have a transfer in who, heck, maybe they go get the OU guy again and go get Jackson Arnold out of the portal, and all of a sudden he blossoms in their offense because they're a little bit better at every other skill position. Who knows? I mean, they could go try to grab Zane Flores or Malachi Smith, depending on whichever one doesn't stay. I mean, it's just one of those things. So what do you think the floor is for next year?
Oh, the floor. I be honest, I don't even just trying to keep up with the 3 games ahead. I haven't looked too much at next season, but the fact that, like you said, they do have a tougher conference. Is next season when they go to Fayetteville, or is that the next season?
That's a great question. I think, I think they don't play Arkansas next year at all. I think we're off until like 2027.
That would be a tough break to have Oregon and Arkansas.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, I could not. It's really tough for me. And next year, that is right. Next year we have the UT Martin Skyhawks at home, at Oregon Ducks, and then Tulsa at home. So next year, maybe the Tulsa win. I mean, UT Martin Skyhawks, I would figure is an easy dub, but who knows? We never count anything here at this point. But then, yeah, next year the conference schedule, we get to play Houston and Baylor, and KU. But I'm skeptical to say the best after this year, and also knowing everything in this year, it's just going to change next year. Is there maybe the better question here is there some optimism surrounding the new quarterbacks of like, hey, you know what? Like maybe next year we get back to a bowl game or get to a bowl game. I'm not going to say this whole year's canceled just yet, but is there some optimism surrounding next year at least to see what a new offense could look like, even if it's not going to be good?
I would definitely say there's more optimism about the quarterback position there is now. And I think a lot of it is we knew what Alan Bowman's ceiling was. Even coming into the season, we thought, oh, he could be really good. We knew what he could do. I mean, there was just like Mason Rudolph. Again, Mason Rudolph, Marshall and I die on the hill that he's the best quarterback to come from Oklahoma State. But he was not going to pull it out of Justice Hill's stomach and go sprint around the corner. Like I remember having an awkward interaction with Rudolph, Texas Tech, maybe on the road. And he pulled it and I don't know if they called a run or he just scrambled and he ran a touchdown. And I said something about it. Like, it's not who you are, right? And he was like, are you saying I'm slow? Are you saying I'm not fast? And in a way, I'm like, kind of, like we've never seen it. And he just kind of laughed. He's like, no, I get it. He's like, I'm not. I was like, but yeah, I wasn't surprised. Like, I know I can run a little bit, just not compared to the guys I'm playing. But we never expect that from Al Bowman, right? We've seen him try to make him do that during the Kansas State game, and it was obviously a horrible flop. But one thing is we saw Rangel can run. We know Smith can run. We know we haven't seen it, but we've been told Flores can run as well. And so that adds a whole new dynamic. We saw the offense, even as bad as it was, how much different it looked that first half of BYU when they did have a dual threat quarterback. When Spencer Sanders was able to run it, Casey Dunn's, that might have been the best his offense has looked when he was able to just let loose, let Spin Sand do his thing a little bit, and things like that. So that is when his offense looks the best. And that would be, again, this is all theoretical if he's back and who's back. That would be the best thing for the offense. And then you lose Ollie, but there's been a lot of talk on Rodney Fields Jr. I mean, they are very high on the freshman running back. We've got to see him a little bit more.
Dives to the goal line, touchdown.
I had to show the Mason Rudolph. Yeah, I'd show a little bit of the running highlight here that I could find real quickly just to see for everyone on YouTube. I mean, but you're right though. He was never a runner. In fact, he gets banged up on his rushing touchdown. But I really am optimistic and hopeful as a fan. So it's good to hear that that's not just me. I mean, I will say I watched him play against the Titans this past weekend, or play for the Titans, excuse me, this past weekend, and man, there was one where he thinks he's going to run for the first down. He thinks he's going to slip by the defenders on the defensive line, and he just is not able to, and he just gets basically just tackled. Not arm tackle, but he gets just the defensive lineman peels off the block and tackles him. I mean, it just made him look very slow. It just was not a very cool movement. I never want to think, wow, how did I do in intramurals when I was just like slinging it around and it was just the sports management club and me. And basically the first two downs, I was the guy hiking it. And the third and fourth down, I was the guy passing the ball because there was no way I was running anywhere close to what Rudolph looked like, of course. But even against way lesser talent, there's no way I was doing anything as good as he was against his talent. I mean, it's just, it gets it's funny to see pro athletes be that much worse at a skill. You see other pro athletes like Lamar Jackson. You're like, well, but the other option is this. And so maybe Malachi Smith, I mean, it's been tweeted out. He's a Lamar Jackson-esque. Now it's tweeted out by, I'm sure, like the Peter Griffin parody Oklahoma State account. So I'm not putting too much credit into it here, but I am hopeful for a quarterback competition next year and something more just lively, seeing Flores actually have a snap or two. Also figuring out what injury he's recovering from would be cool, just because I think it was a lower extremity from what I understand, but who knows? I've made the joke many times, and now it wasn't a joke. It was just purely a statement of, I've seen him walk across to practice before just fine. I've not seen him walk across to practice after the reporting of him having surgery, but then again, I haven't seen him walk across or go across the street, so maybe it's just me missing him. I just think it's funny overall. I want to ask you here about basketball for a little bit and then about wrestling here before we end out. Basketball tonight, playing against Green Bay. We're up 20 right now with about 6 minutes left in the game. It was, huh? Oh, I'm behind. Oh, well,
19
maybe
4:30 now.
19 with 4:30. Well, hey, pretty close and even more times off. So I'll take it. But it looks like here we're at least halftime was very, very close. It looks like this time at least we're a little bit closer to being maybe a little bit better, but I don't know how good Green Bay is. I just, not even off this game, just want to ask you in general, do you think this basketball team will be better than last year's team? If you had to guess. I know it's a ton of new guys on the team too.
Yeah. I don't know about if we're going purely record wise. I wouldn't expect it to be too much better just because I had an uncle text me right before saying, I already know the first 2 minutes, it's going to be a bad basketball season. I could have told you that before, right? This is a team. The downfall of Chad Weiberg wanted to make sure he got the right guy. Because I remember sitting at NCAA wrestling tournament in Marshall, and he's about to pull his hair out because he's still waiting on OSU to make a coaching hire. And who's it going to be? And, he's watching airplanes and he's on the phone. And it's driving him crazy because they just kept taking their time. And you had all these people just keep hiring people at OSU. How do you get? I'm going to ask Weiberg about it. He's like, I just wanted to take my time. I want to make sure I found the right guy because I think he was thinking long term. And usually you do that, it does hurt you more short term. So when Lutz was hired later, he wasn't able to really dive into the transfer portal as much as people would like. There wasn't as much talent left, nor is anyone. We remember Boynton's comments last year. There's not money to go around at people, and they just had to buy out Boynton. So there's even less money to go around. And then pay to have another decent coach come. So the money was thin. He also wanted to find not only talent, but guys that matched his He wanted defense. He wanted guys who really push the ball. He needs some shooters. There were the shooters on the team. We need some big guys, and big guys are hard to come by, especially late in the game. And there was a time when Marshall was wondering, I don't know if they're going to have a big man at this point. Like, they really need a big man. And I'm pretty sure they had to go to like another country, I think, to find a big man. And so I do think it'll be a struggle. The mix of that with, I think people forget, like, in this conference realignment, we think of how much stronger the SEC got with adding teams like OU and Texas, and how much better the Big Ten got by adding theoretically USC, but Washington and Oregon. But now the Big 12 adds Arizona. You already added Houston last season. I mean, those are really good perennial powerhouses you have in this conference now that OSU has to deal with. Like, you can think of back some of the teams we were talking about earlier that were pretty good OSU teams, and they may perform like this one does just because of the type of teams that they're playing. I mean, it is going to be, I mean, it every week, once conference play starts, every game is going to be like a, holy cow, this is a tough game. I mean, and so that's what stinks for the rebuilding. As Steve Lutz starts this rebuilding era, is the gauntlet that he has to try to build a team while enduring and winning enough games to keep a job and a fan base hopeful as well. It's a gauntlet that he has to endure while going through all this change in the Big 12.
Yeah, and to your point, that was a great recall, because I don't think I asked you, hey, we're going to talk basketball roster before this, and yeah, you pulled it out. And Drija Vukovic, is what I'm going to say, or Vukovic, is from, of course, Belgrade, Serbia. I did not pronounce that flawlessly because he's not from the United States, unfortunately.
You know how I knew that?
I know. How?
Because I read pistolsfiringblog.com.
Ah, where you guys put out an article, I'm assuming? Yeah. No. Or Marshall wrote something. That's I love it. All those links to Pistols Firing Blog will be down in the description, of course. But I will say there's quite a few names here reading on the roster where I'm going, okay, the first guy I recognize here off of the half of the team is Bryce Thompson. And then, okay, there's Connor Dow, but that's, if you're really following Oklahoma State basketball last year, that's how you remember him. And then Jermon Keller, I mean, Thompson and Keller, I think, are the household-ish names. And then Dow, I would say, is a name that some know, but it's the guy doing a podcast here about Oklahoma State basketball, not necessarily the common Oklahoma State fan who's like, hey, everyone's talking about the Rowdy. What's going on? I mean, I just think there's part of it as with that as well. Now I want to pivot a little bit here and talk to you about some wrestling. So, of course, Coach David Taylor is competing right now, or at least maybe he's stopped competing for a little bit. I mean, he's done with his current competition status for the Olympics. Am I right here for 2020? I mean, 8. I mean, what's he competing for right now? Because he's on a math right now, right?
Well, he just got back. He just got back from Albania, competing in the World Championships, and he got a bronze medal, which is kind of wild to talk about a coach competing and winning a world bronze medal against a stacked bracket. Like, I know, again, bronze is a big deal when you're outside of when I've been covering OSU wrestling for 10 years or whatever I have now, bronze doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but it's a huge deal. I mean, he has 5 or 6 world medals that he has. He has Olympic gold medal, a couple of world titles. That's the first time he's actually finished outside the top 2 in a world competition, either the Worlds or the Olympics. So he's back for that. He had told us before he was going that was his last competition. He had told us that once before. When he got the job, he just kind of subtly mentioned like he was done competing. He told us that when he took the job, though, that Chad Weiberg and administration thought he was still going to compete, because he mentioned something about retiring, and they're like, oh, we thought you were still going to compete while you're here. Like, he had just was a match away from making the Olympic team for the second time. He got upset, and that guy who upset him went to the Olympics. And so that's kind of what ultimately led him to Stillwater, and that was kind of just about his sign that, he's going to hang it up. Kind of got the competitive fire again, being in the new college room and these new guys, and he kind of got the itch again, which is crazy when you're so good at something, and he just kind of woke up one day and was like, you know what? I might go compete to be the best in the country today. And so theoretically, I mean, a couple weeks later, he comes out, and there are rumors that he was going to, I was like, I don't know. I didn't hear anything. And then sure enough, he goes to the U.S. trials. He wins the whole daggum thing at a new weight. He went up a weight. And then he goes to Albania and wins the bronze medal. So he did tell us before that was his retirement. He didn't plan on it. He was very emotional after he won that bronze medal, and they introduced him and kind of thanked him there. I mean, he's a legend in wrestling. He's almost John Smith-esque. He doesn't have 2 gold medals, but he does have one to his name. But the impact he's had on this younger generation that he's now recruiting and the guys in the room right now, I mean, that's their John Smith. I mean, if you're an OSU fan or a wrestling fan, you have, David Taylor posters probably up in your wall, or Jordan Burroughs or guys like that. But he's one of those guys who you're going to have the picture or the poster on his wall. So it's a big deal. And so, yeah, I mean, that it's just kind of surreal, especially for the non-wrestling fans to know that that's even a possibility of a coach still competing, and here he won the world medal. So as far as we know, he says that's it. Who knows? I mean, he's in his 30s now, so that's kind of up there to start competing in that kind of style, especially when wrestling's weird where you're not regularly doing it. On top of all the day-to-day chores of full-time coaching, you also would have to prepare for, there's world championships in a year and this world championships, and you don't have the Olympics again until 2028. So who knows what his body's going to be like in 4 years as well. But he says that's it, but to go off like he did as a head coach to win a bronze medal is pretty incredible for sure.
Yeah, no kidding. And we are recording this on, I almost said March, but we are recording this on November 4th, to be clear. So I want to ask you, when does wrestling season start? I know football season now has got to be in the rear view for a lot of fans.
Yeah. November 15th will be their first duel. So was that next week on a Friday? They go to Utah Valley. And then the first home duel will be November 22nd against Wyoming. So that'll be the start of – it'll be the first time in 33 years that there's been a duel at Gallagher Arena that John Smith was not the coach. So it'll kind of be our first time to see a little thing. My wife asks, they always come out to beautiful people. I don't know if you've ever been to a duel, and that's kind of a big deal. And it just kind of – there's a certain thing about it. She's like, are they still going to come out to that? And I don't know. Like, you don't know what changes. He mentions there might be a subtle tweak to the singlets, and so you don't know what all is going to happen, or just the style of, a lot of change. And so I'm excited for that duel to see what this new era will look like. Not that I hated the last era or anything, but just change can be exciting when you got someone like David Taylor and as passionate and fiery as he is with things right now. Just to see what he has up his sleeve is exciting to see get going, especially because it feels like, even though he's just hired in May, I feel like we've been waiting for this guy to coach a duel for a long time now.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember too much, but I went to Oklahoma State for 6 years. So I will say, for the 4 years that you and I were students together, I was the DJ for every wrestling match. So I remember playing Beautiful People every single time. Yeah. I got some compliments from one of our professors, our old professors, Ray Murray, on playing a lot of rock music, but is when we played, I think it's when we had to do it, against Iowa, and we ended up losing. It was like a packed house and stuff. Plus the total team score, I want to say it was 2017 or 2018, kind of that last year we were in college. But anyways, how are we going to do in wrestling for the whole season here, and kind of as it goes to Big 12 championship stuff as well? How do you think we'll do?
Great. I mean, a Big 12 title is definitely it's expected, though, at Oklahoma State, right? Last year they finished second, and it was kind of like a disappointment. I mean, they're like, oh, John Smith lost it because he finished his second at Big 12s, which is crazy the difference, because we're talking about Mike Gundy being invincible with one conference title in 18, 19 years. And so those are expected, but I think you can expect OSU to get back into the top three. Penn State is just incredible. I mean, it's not fair, the level that they're at, so it would take a lot of time for him to reach that, and I think he could. If anyone can, it would be him at this point, just because they made a big splash hire, and that's what it was going to take to reach a team like Penn State, especially because Kel Sanderson's only getting older as well. But yeah, I expect them to be a top three kind of team, competing up there with Iowa and Ohio State and those Big Ten teams. I'm not saying a miraculous national championship, but just his name alone has brought in a lot of talent, and it's perfect to have a guy like that in college sports today, because you can make immediate impacts. You're not just recruiting freshmen now that can help you 2 or 3 years down the road. Right off the bat, you're bringing in a guy like Wyatt Hendrickson, who's a 2-time All-American and could very well be the best heavyweight in the country from Air Force at heavyweight. And so, and just a good dude. He's been fun to get to know. He was a blast to watch when he was at Air Force. You know, we got to watch him at some national tournaments and at the Big 12 tournament the last 3 or 4 years. And so you bring guys like that. Dean Hamilton's a multiple-time All-American. He got 3 transfers that he brought in that all of them have, finished All-American more than once. So definitely a deep, stacked lineup for your first time. And obviously, even before he gets here, OSU is going to have a lot of talent on that lineup either. It's not like he was handed he's not Steve Lutz taking over a program. No knock on Mike Morton, but kind of a program limping that you kind of revitalize. You're not revitalizing Oklahoma State wrestling. It's, okay, keep it going, and can you get us back to the level that it was, basically.
Yeah, that would be that'd be pretty incredible if he could, especially if it's done anytime quickly. But who knows? I'm hopeful from everything you've told me, about wrestling. Is there any guys here who could win the national championship? Just single guys, eligible to do so, you think?
Yeah, for sure. Wyatt Hendrickson is still going to be in the talk. I said that Air Force transfer. And just he's able to. He talked. It's a chore, right? Competing at an Air Force academy, at a military academy, and he was talking about. He's like, it's kind of easy. He's like, back in the day, or when he was at Air Force, he was telling us it was, hey, you got to do this, this, this. Here's your hour and a half or 2 hours to worry about wrestling, and then you got to go do this, this, and this. And he's like, now I'm here, and it's, hey, do whatever you want for wrestling, and we'll fit the other stuff in later. He's like, I can get to practice an hour early and start recovery. I can stay at practice an hour late if I need to. On top of what people don't realize in other sports as well is how big of an asset it is to have. When David Taylor's competing against the best in the world, he's training against these college kids. Like, that's who they get to train with. It's not like, again, Mike Gundy or Steve Lutz saying, do this, do that, and pointing you in direction and trying to coach you up. He's in there. I think we talked about it when he first got hired. Like, imagine Derrick Henry being the coach and coming to run against a defense. Like, and that's going to obviously make the defense a lot better, where he's not only coaching you, but you're trying to get him down. And so Wyatt Hendricks got to work out with him some. Dustin Plott was a national runner-up last year. Parker Keckheisen is incredible. That's who beat him in the finals, the Big 12 finals and the NCAA finals. He's really good. But again, Coach Taylor talks about, he's like, Dustin Plott's reached another level, because that's who, when he went to the U.S. national or the U.S. Trials, he took Dustin Plott with him as his partner. Like, that's the main guys he's been training with. He took Braden Thompson with him to Albania just because it was too close to the season. He didn't want Dustin Plott going across the world for right before the season started. But he's reached another level, and because he has been able to train and just to see what he does, like to see what it takes of, obviously David Taylor's going to be another level athletically and just a skill, but the level of just work it takes to be one of the best in the world, and has raised Dustin Plott too. So I could see Dustin Plott. That would maybe the only way to get him to the level of being able to take out a guy like Parker Keckheisen as well for a national title.
Wow, it sounds like it could be incredible, but also set up to be a little more optimistic about this wrestling season as opposed to the rest of the football season or even next football season. So love to hear it. All right, well, one more question here about football here before we wrap it up. Do you have a prediction for this weekend, the TCU Oklahoma State match? I should say match game. We're just talking about wrestling, but yeah, in Fort Worth. I know TCU's favored because we're not favored for any of our 3 final games of the season. But that being said, yeah, what do you think happens this weekend here?
Oh man, I haven't got to predictions yet since it's only Monday, but I would. If I had to publicly when I do have to publicly put my prediction out there, I would have TCU winning. Again, like I said, I'm not going to pick this team to win a game unless there's a miracle that happens on defense. If I had to pick, what is the spread? Is it really 12.5? They're 12.5 point favorites, TCU? Golly. Like the offense being better, they score. I would say OSU 24, TCU 24. Give them like 38. not quite. They don't have quite the bulldozer that Arizona had. I just had predicted Scotty would just do whatever he wanted. TC doesn't quite have that. But again, not only do I think they'll win or that OSU will lose, I just at this point can't even see games being close because of that defense.
Yeah, honestly, it's one of the more confounding things I've had in my Oklahoma State fandom. I mean, Loyal and True just got the photo the other day, at least pulled up on my phone here. I was looking through some older photos, and I still can't believe that. Yeah, I've been watching photos since it was Lewis Field, or watching games since Lewis Field, and now we're all the way at the point where I'm the least optimistic I've ever been as a Oklahoma State fan heading into the final 3 games of the season. I mean, even the 7-6 season was like, hey, you know what? Mason Rudolph's going to be out there. Like we're going to head into that kind of season. Or when it was 7-6 and Spencer Sanders, it was like, well, you know what? But like there'll be something new that happens, towards the end of the season. We'll see some more guys. This is pessimistic, but maybe Sanders will come back and kind of save the rest of the deal and we'll still make a bowl game. But this isn't even bowl game possibilities. I mean, this is, and then also go back to that 7-6 with Mason Rudolph. It was like I didn't think at all we get to a bowl game that year. So we had to beat OU to go to a bowl game. I mean, it just seemed crazy. But then again, we at least got to see a new quarterback in the system that was going to be pretty darn proactive. And I see Bowman playing down the stretch. I don't see Malachi Smith being the starter named the starter tomorrow, and all of a sudden we're off to the races. And it's like, whoa, what are we going to do? Because honestly, he might be fighting for it's probably up for grabs completely, the quarterback position heading to this offseason. I mean, I have a hard time believing it's not going to be completely open, and Smith's going to be the only guy who has any reps besides, of course, Gary Rangel. But Flores won't have any reps, even though I think he's the guy with the most hype, I would say. And he's older than Smith, so I'd also think that gives him a little bit leg up on Smith. But then Rangel coming back, theoretically, he's played pretty darn decent in the one game where he was actually starting from the beginning and was kind of set up well. So who knows? Well, Dekota, I know where everyone can find you, but I know your Twitter handle in X is not at Calvin Glenn or at Marshall Scott. Okay, I know it's at Dekota Gregory. But of course, where can everyone else kind of read your stuff here and view your articles and work? What websites and stuff?
Yeah, so my name is spelled wrong, in case you guys didn't know that. It's Dekota.
Wait, is it actually spelled wrong, or was it meant to be spelled Dakota?
No, it's going to be like that. Everyone else is spelled with A. That's why I'm able to just have a unique. So if anyone, most time they go look for Dekota Gregory, they're going to put an A there. So it's Dekota Gregory. But yeah, I cover OSU for pistolsfiringblog.com, and this is probably the best time to start looking at our website. Even if you don't want football, if you're ready to move on, I dive into wrestling, and I've been covering for 10 years, and maybe I'm biased because he's one of my best friends, but I don't think there's a guy out there that covers the college basketball team that they cover better than Marshall does. As OSU starts in this new era under Steve Lutz. He was killing it when Mike Boynton was here, so I imagine he'll continue to build that relationship with Steve Lutz and get you the best coverage you need for basketball. So, even with football season ending, even though it's doom and gloom for the next 3 weeks, we'll have you covered till March for sure. So all the hype for wrestling and the newness of basketball will all be there.
And women's basketball and softball and baseball and equestrian and get all Devin's great photos of the games. Those are what I look forward to most now, is because I'm like, oh man, Devin's just killing it on the photography aspect here for Pistons Firing, because football games.
He'll be at everything.
Yeah, the football games do not end with the score I'd want them to, but man, it looks good on the photos aspect afterwards, at least. So shout out to Devin there as well too. Well, Dakota, thanks so much here for joining on the latest episode of the CGA Tour podcast, and please follow, subscribe, like, comment, share, and thank you so much for all of the new listeners, watchers, and everything in between. We'll catch you guys soon.